Could a single punch really shatter an entire galaxy? Before we dive into this case file, make sure you're subscribed to our channel for more interdimensional investigation stories, just like this one. Hit that notification bell so you never miss when reality breaks down in the most spectacular ways possible. Today's case file is unlike anything we've documented before. We're examining what happens when Saitama, the hero who defeats anyone with one hit, somehow crosses into the grimdark, war-torn universe of Warhammer 40,000. This is a hypothetical battle analysis that pits cosmic might against unimaginable power. When a literal godslayer faces the forces of chaos, the Imperium, and horrors beyond comprehension, who truly wins? This is Case File Omega 77. Clearance level, Obsidian. The investigation begins now. The afternoon sun filtered through the cracked window of the apartment in City Z, casting long shadows across the peeling wallpaper and worn tatami mats. Saitama sat cross-legged on his futon, methodically circling items in a grocery store circular with a red pen. Each circle was precise, deliberate. Cabbage, half off. Bean sprouts, buy one, get one free. Eggs, limited time only. This was the highlight of his Wednesday, the kind of sale that came around maybe twice a month if you were lucky. Genos stood in the middle of the small living room, his mechanical frame rigid with frustration, chrome fingers gesturing in sharp, emphatic movements that made soft, whirring sounds with each motion. "Sensei, you must take your hero work more seriously." The cyborg's voice carried that tone of desperate concern that Saitama had grown accustomed to over the months they'd been together. "You're ranked 7th in the C-class. 7th! Do you understand how insulting that is to someone of your abilities? You could be S-class. You should be S-class. Instead, you're barely ahead of people who catch purse snatchers." Saitama didn't look up from his circular. "Uh-huh." His finger moved to another item. Instant noodles, 3 packs for the price of 2. He circled it carefully. "Hey, look at this. They're doing that promotion again. If I leave now, I can make it before the old ladies clean out the produce section. You know how they get. Like vultures. Sweet, elderly vultures with sharp elbows." "Sensei!" Genos' optical sensors flashed brighter, a sign he was genuinely agitated. "Are you even listening to me? This is about your reputation, your standing in the hero community, the respect you deserve." Sure. Saitama finally looked up, his expression as blank as ever. "Hero work, rankings, very important stuff." He stood, stretching his arms above his head until his shoulders popped. His bald head caught the light, gleaming like polished marble. "But heroes gotta eat too, Genos, and I'm almost out of instant noodles. Do you know what it's like to run out of instant noodles? It's a tragedy, a real tragedy." Genos opened his mouth to launch into another lecture, probably the same one about proper nutrition and how instant noodles weren't a food group, when he stopped. His sensors picked up something unusual, a distortion in the air, right in the center of the room between the small television and the kitchen area that was really just a hot plate and a sink. It started as barely a shimmer, like heat rising from summer pavement, the kind of thing you might dismiss as a trick of the light. But it grew more pronounced with each passing second, the air itself seeming to fold in on itself in ways that made Genos' optical processors struggle to focus. "Sensei, something is happening." Genos' voice dropped to a warning tone, and panels along his arms slid open, revealing the glowing cores of his incineration cannons. Saitama noticed it too. The shimmer was expanding now, tearing reality like someone ripping wet paper. Golden light poured through the gap, brilliant and painful to look at, mixed with something else, something that screamed. The sound wasn't audible in the traditional sense, but both of them felt it in their bones, in their teeth, in the base of their skulls. It was wrongness given form, a fundamental violation of natural law that made Genos' circuits spark and pop and caused Saitama's eye to twitch in annoyance. Great, another weird thing. Saitama sighed, the kind of deep, world-weary sigh of a man who'd seen too many bizarre phenomena interrupt his daily routine. "This better not make me miss the sale. The sale ends at 5 o'clock. It's 4:15 now. I've got 45 minutes. The rift expanded violently, suddenly, going from the size of a basketball to the size of a car in the span of a heartbeat. A force like a cosmic vacuum pulled at everything in the room. The grocery circular was ripped from Saitama's hand and sucked into the golden light. The futon slid across the floor. Empty cup noodle containers flew through the air. Genos's feet, anchored by his considerable mechanical weight, held firm against the floor, servos straining as he grabbed for the doorframe with one hand and reached for his teacher with the other. "Sensei, get back!" Genos's hand stretched out, fingers splayed, but the distance was too great and the force too immense. Saitama felt himself being dragged toward the rip in space. His feet left the ground. His body tilted horizontal. For a brief moment he considered just punching the thing, but past experience had taught him that punching dimensional anomalies usually just made them worse. He tumbled into the golden light, his expression more irritated than frightened, like a man who'd just missed his bus. "This is really inconvenient," he said, as the light swallowed him whole. "Sensei!" Genos lunged forward, his hand grasping at empty air where Saitama had been a moment before. The rift collapsed with a sound like thunder, like a door slamming in an empty cathedral, leaving Genos alone in the suddenly quiet apartment. The cyborg stood frozen, arms still extended, optical sensors wide with shock. Then he spun in a circle, scanning every spectrum he had available. Thermal, electromagnetic, gravitational. Nothing. His teacher was simply gone. "Sensei," he whispered, and for once the mighty demon cyborg sounded like what he really was. A young man who just lost the only person who mattered to him. Reality reassembled itself in pieces, like a jigsaw puzzle being put together by drunk hands. First came sound, crashing into Saitama's consciousness with the subtlety of a freight train. The thunder of artillery, each boom feeling like it was trying to crack his skull open. The scream of engines, high-pitched and mechanical, the roar of something inhuman, something that shouldn't have vocal cords but was making noise anyway. Then came sensation, layering on top of the sound. Heat, intense and suffocating, the kind that made sweat evaporate before it could form. Smoke that burned his nostrils and tasted like burning chemicals and melted plastic and something organic that he didn't want to identify. The acrid, bitter taste of war settling on his tongue. Finally, sight returned, and Saitama wished it hadn't. He landed on his feet because years of hero work had taught him to always stick the landing no matter what. His knees bent slightly to absorb the impact, and he straightened up. Looking around to get his bearings, he stood in the middle of hell. There was no other word for it. The sky above was the wrong colour, a sickly purple red that pulsed and writhed like an infected wound, like the sky itself had gangrene. Clouds moved in directions that clouds shouldn't move, spiralling inward towards some central point that hurt to look at. The ground beneath his feet was cracked obsidian, black volcanic glass that was still warm from whatever apocalypse had shattered it. Cracks ran through the ground like veins, and through those cracks he could see something glowing, something that whispered. Around him, as far as his eyes could see, was war. Not the kind of war he'd seen on television documentaries or read about in manga. This was war distilled to its most fundamental, most horrifying essence. Men in thick armour the colour of dirt and rust, carrying weapons that looked like oversized flashlights, fired desperately at things that shouldn't exist. The weapons made sharp, cracking sounds, and where the beams hit, flesh boiled and stone melted. The men screamed orders in a language Saitama didn't recognize, their voices hoarse and desperate. They were dying. He could see it in their movements, in the way they fired with the frantic energy of people who knew they were already dead but refused to accept it. Creatures made of red muscle and brass armour charged forward through the gunfire, wielding axes the size of cars, each one dripping with something that looked like blood but moved wrong, too thick, too eager to flow. Their heads were skulls, bleached white bone with horns that curved and twisted. Their eyes were empty sockets filled with fire. Buildings that looked like Gothic cathedrals, all spires and stained glass and religious iconography, burned in the distance. Smoke rose in pillars that seemed to reach the wounded sky, and everywhere, coating every surface, piled in heaps and scattered in pieces, were bodies. Human bodies mostly, but also things that might have been human once. "Where am I?" Saitama looked down at himself, brushing his hands over his yellow suit. Not a speck of dust, not a single rip. His red gloves were pristine, his white cape unmarked. It was like he'd stepped out of his apartment directly into this nightmare without picking up so much as a piece of lint along the way. This definitely isn't the grocery store. The grocery store doesn't have this many skulls. A roar shook the battlefield, not a sound that came from the left or right or ahead or behind. It came from everywhere at once, vibrating through the ground and the air and Saitama's bones. Something massive was approaching, pushing through the smaller creatures like a man wading through tall grass. The lesser demons, the things with the axes and the burning eyes, scrambled to get out of its way. It emerged from the smoke and the chaos, and Saitama got his first clear look at it. The thing was easily 40 feet tall, maybe more, its body covered in skin the colour of fresh blood, glistening and wet like it had just been flayed. Muscles rippled beneath the skin with each movement, each one the size of a car. Its legs were bent backward like a goat's, ending in hooves that left burning prints on the obsidian. Wings spread from its back, leathery and torn, stretching wide enough to cast a shadow over a city block. Horns curved from its skull, each one as long as a telephone pole, covered in runes that seemed to writhe and change when Saitama looked at them. Its eyes burned with an intelligence that was somehow worse than mindless rage. This thing knew what it was doing. It enjoyed it. Kabanda, greatest of Khorne's bloodthirsters, herald of the blood god himself, had noticed the bald man in the yellow suit. The demon's mouth opened, revealing teeth like swords, and when it spoke, the words weren't so much heard as felt. They hammered into reality like nails driven into wood. Another skull for the skull throne, another soul for the blood god. The voice was a landslide given speech, an avalanche of pure violence and rage compressed into language. It charged, and the ground cracked under each footfall. The wings spread wide, catching air that shouldn't move the way it moved, and the demon launched itself forward. Its axe, a weapon that looked like it had been forged from a fallen star and quenched in the blood of worlds, raised high above its head. The blade caught the diseased light of the sky and reflected it back in shades of crimson. Imperial guardsmen, the soldiers in the rust-coloured armour, scattered in every direction. Some dove into craters, others simply ran, their minds unable to process the sight of a greater demon at full charge. A few, the ones too slow or too brave or too frozen with fear, were crushed under Kabanda's hooves, reduced to red smears on black glass. Saitama watched it come. He'd seen this before in a way. Different monster, same energy, the kind that thought size and volume made them strong, the kind that relied on intimidation and spectacle. Back home, he'd fought the Deep-Sea King, who'd been big and scary and had ultimately gone down in one punch. He'd fought Vaccine Man, who'd been even bigger and had also gone down in one punch. This thing, Kabanda, was definitely bigger than both of them combined. But size had stopped meaning much to Saitama a long time ago. "Okay," he said quietly, his voice barely audible over the roar of battle. He didn't take a stance, didn't power up, didn't do anything dramatic. He just stood there, one hand hanging loose at his side. Kabanda swung its axe down. The blow carried enough force to split a titan in half, to carve through buildings, to crack the planet's crust. The air screamed as it was displaced. Reality itself seemed to bend away from the weapon's edge. The axe descended on Saitama's head, with the inevitability of a guillotine blade. Saitama backhanded it. There was no technique involved, no martial arts form or special move, just a casual swing of his hand, the kind of motion you'd use to brush away an annoying fly, or to swat at a mosquito that had been buzzing around your ear. His hand connected with the flat of the axe blade, and several things happened at once. The axe stopped moving. The tremendous force behind it, the accumulated momentum of a greater demon's charge, simply ceased to exist. Kabanda's arm, unable to comprehend why its weapon had stopped, wrenched backward with a sound like tearing metal. Then the demon exploded. Not in a shower of blood or gore or chunks of meat like a normal creature might. Khabander exploded in a burst of pure warp energy, its physical form unable to contain the contradiction of being stopped so absolutely, so completely. The thing shrieked as it was banished, its essence torn from reality and hurled back to the realm of chaos, where it would take 1,000 years to reform. The shockwave from its destruction flattened everything within 50 yards. Imperial guardsmen were knocked off their feet. Lesser demons were atomized. Stone walls that had stood for centuries crumbled to dust. Except Saitama, who stood exactly where he'd been, hand still raised from the backhand, not a hair out of place. Well, he didn't have any hair, but if he did, it wouldn't have been out of place. The battlefield went silent. It was the kind of silence that only comes after something impossible happens, when every mind present has to shut down for a moment to process what they've just witnessed. Imperial guardsmen stopped firing their laser guns mid-shot. Chaos cultists stopped chanting their dark prayers. Even the smaller demons paused, confused by the sudden absence of their leader. Their connection to Khabander's will severed so completely that they didn't know what to do with themselves. Saitama lowered his hand and looked at the crater where the demon had been standing. Was that important? It seemed angry. I hope I didn't interrupt something. His voice carried across the silent battlefield with perfect clarity. From a command bunker half a mile away, carved into what remained of a fortress wall, Lord Castellan Ursarkar E. Creed lowered his magnoculars with shaking hands. The cigar that had been clamped between his teeth for the last 6 hours fell from his mouth, landing in the mud at his feet with a soft hiss. Creed was a big man, broad-shouldered and thick-necked, with the kind of face that looked like it had been carved from granite with a dull chisel. He'd been fighting wars since he was old enough to hold a laser gun. He'd commanded armies across 100 worlds, orchestrated victories against impossible odds, earned enough medals to cover his chest twice over. In 40 years of warfare, fighting Xenos and traitors and demons across 100 battlefields, watching men die and killing enemies by the thousands, he had never seen anything like what he'd just witnessed, never even imagined anything like it. "Get me," he said slowly, each word careful and measured. "Every sensor reading we have on that man, every pit capture, every Auspex scan, every scrap of data. I want to know what he is, where he came from, and how in the Emperor's name he just killed Khabander with a backhand." His voice was steady, but his officers could hear the undercurrent of shock beneath it. Commissar Yarrick stood beside him, close enough that Creed could hear the soft whirring of his augmetic arm as it clenched and unclenched. Yarrick was a legend in his own right, a man who'd fought Ghazghkull Mag Uruk Thraka across 12 worlds and lived to tell about it. Half his face was bionic, scarred metal replacing flesh that had been burned away decades ago. One eye was human, bright and sharp. The other was augmetic, a glowing red lens that could see in 12 spectrums. His right arm had been torn off by Ghazghkull's power claw and replaced with an augmetic limb of his own, a crackling power claw that he'd taken from an orc warboss he'd killed in single combat. The old warrior's face, what remained of it, showed something it rarely did: uncertainty, maybe even fear. "Sir, should we open fire?" Yarrick's hand moved to the Stormbolter mag lock to his hip. Creed picked up his cigar from the mud, examined it, decided it was still salvageable, and put it back in his mouth. He didn't light it, just chewed on it while he thought. The bald man in the yellow suit stood in the middle of a crater, surrounded by the fading energy of a banished greater demon, looking around with an expression of complete confusion. Not fear, not battle rage, just confusion, like a tourist who'd gotten off at the wrong stop. "No," Creed said finally, "but surround him, carefully, very carefully. Whatever that was, I want answers before we make any decisions we'll regret, and get me a Vox link to Orbit. Whoever's in command up there needs to know about this immediately." Within minutes, Saitama found himself encircled by 200 laser guns, all trained on his center mass. The soldiers holding them looked terrified, their hands shaking slightly, but they held their ground. These were Cadian soldiers, the finest the Imperium had to offer, men and women who'd held the line against 13 Black Crusades. They didn't break easily. Behind them, Yarrick approached, his stormbolter held low but ready, finger resting near the trigger. Each step was measured. Careful, the kind of approach you'd use when dealing with an unexploded bomb. The Commissar stopped 10 feet from Saitama, close enough to talk without shouting, but far enough to react if things went sideways. Up close, Yarrick could see more details. The yellow suit was some kind of jumpsuit, bright and garish, with a white cape attached at the shoulders. The man wearing it was completely bald, not a hair anywhere on his head, and his expression was utterly bland. Not the cold blankness of a trained killer, or the empty stare of a corrupted cultist. Just regular, everyday blankness, like someone waiting for a bus. "Identify yourself," Yarrick's voice was a growl that had been refined over decades of shouting orders over artillery fire. "What are you? Sanctioned psyker, weapon of the Adeptus Mechanicus? Some new breed of a human the biologist cooked up?" His augmetic eye cycled through different viewing modes, trying to get a read on the stranger. Thermal showed nothing unusual. Electromagnetic showed no power signatures. Even the warp sight mode, which should have shown some flicker of a soul, showed only emptiness. Saitama blinked, looking at Yarrick with the kind of polite confusion of someone who'd just been asked a question in a language they didn't speak. "I'm just a hero for fun. Can someone tell me how to get home? I was supposed to get groceries. There's a really good sale on cabbage that ends at 5 o'clock. Yarrick's augmetic eye flickered. A hero. The word sounded foreign in his mouth, like he was testing out a concept he'd heard about but never really believed in. For fun? Yeah, I mean, I'm registered with the Hero Association and everything. Got my hero card and my ranking. C-class, rank 7. Not great, but I'm working on it. You destroyed Kabanda with a touch. Yarrick's hand tightened on his stormbolter. Is that what that was? Saitama looked back at the crater, scratching his head where hair should have been. He seemed really mad. Big guy, red skin, lots of screaming. Did I do something wrong? Was he important? Yarrick studied him for a long moment, his decades of experience trying to categorize this threat. He'd fought demons before, killed them, banished them, watched good men die screaming as corruption took hold. But this man, this bald stranger in a ridiculous yellow suit, showed no taint, no corruption, no mark of chaos whatsoever. His eyes were clear, his skin showed no mutations, his voice carried no whispers of the warp. He was clean in a way that shouldn't be possible for someone who'd just touched a greater demon. And that made him more dangerous than any demon Yarrick had ever faced, because it meant the rules didn't apply to him. Take him to orbit, Yarrick ordered, making a decision he hoped he wouldn't regret. Lord Creed, inform Segmentum Command. We have a situation that requires inquisitorial attention. Highest priority, a Vox operator, a young woman with her face half hidden behind a rebreather mask, called out from the bunker entrance. Already done, sir. Astropathic message sent. Response received. Inquisitor Eisenhorn is en route from the Asina. His ship was already in system. ETA? 6 hours. Yarrick nodded, then turned back to Saitama, his power claw crackling slightly as he pointed toward a transport vehicle. You, he said, are coming with us. Non-negotiable. Saitama shrugged, his cape fluttering slightly in the smoke-filled wind. Okay, do you guys have a supermarket on your spaceship? I really need to stock up on instant noodles. The Imperial Guard transport rumbled through the devastated landscape of Cadia, its treads grinding over rubble and the remains of things best left unexamined. The interior was cramped, designed for efficiency rather than comfort, with bench seats along both sides and a single armoured viewport in the back. Saitama sat in the middle of one bench, surrounded by soldiers who couldn't stop staring at him. Their laser guns were technically pointed at the floor, but everyone in the vehicle knew they could be raised in a fraction of a second. The soldiers were young, most of them, barely past their teens, with faces already aged by war. They wore the standard Cadian uniform, thick flak armour the colour of rust and dirt, rebreather masks hanging around their necks. One of them, a kid who couldn't have been more than 19, kept muttering prayers under his breath, his fingers moving over prayer beads carved from spent shell casings. Another, a woman with a scar across her cheek that looked fresh, just stared at Saitama with wide eyes. He'd tried making conversation when they first loaded him in, asking about the planet and whether they had any good restaurants. but the soldiers had just mumbled prayers to someone called the Emperor and clutched their weapons tighter. After the third attempt resulted in more fearful silence, Saitama gave up and just looked out the viewport. Through the armoured glass, he could see more of the planet. Cadia was broken. Not just damaged in the way a city gets damaged during a monster attack, with collapsed buildings and cracked streets that could be repaired given time and resources. This was fundamental destruction, apocalyptic in the truest sense of the word. Cracks ran through the ground like wounds that would never heal, some of them wide enough to swallow buildings. Through those cracks, Saitama could see something that made his eyes hurt, a swirling chaos of colours that shouldn't exist, purples and greens and reds that seemed to move with purpose. Faces appeared in the swirls, screaming mouths and grasping hands, before dissolving back into the chaos. It was like looking at insanity given physical form. In the distance, what remained of cities burned with fires that seemed to feed on nothing, flames that moved against the wind. Gothic architecture, all spires and gargoyles and religious statues, lay toppled and broken. And everywhere, scattered like discarded toys, were the machines of war. Tanks with their turrets blown off, artillery pieces melted into slag, transport vehicles overturned and gutted by fire. "What happened here?" Saitama asked, directing the question to the young soldier with the prayer beads. The soldier flinched like he'd been struck, his knuckles white around his laser gun. For a moment, it looked like he wouldn't answer. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he spoke. The Despoiler came, Abaddon the Despoiler, War Master of Chaos. For 10,000 years he launched 12 Black Crusades from the Eye of Terror, trying to break through the Cadian Gate. 12 times we held. 12 times we threw him back. The soldier's voice cracked slightly. The 13th time he succeeded. He broke Cadia, literally broke it, shattered the planet. Cadia broke before the guard did, but it still broke. A single tear ran down the soldier's face, cutting a clean line through the dirt and grime. This is all that's left, fragments held together by the Emperor's will alone. "That's depressing," Saitama said honestly, and he meant it. Back home, City Z got attacked pretty regularly, maybe once a week, sometimes more. But after each attack, people rebuilt. The Hero Association sent construction crews. Insurance companies paid out. Life went on. This wasn't that. This was loss, so complete, so total, that rebuilding wasn't even a possibility. This was the end, and everyone knew it. "That's the Imperium," the soldier replied, his voice hollow. 10,000 years of this. Every day. Every world. The only question is whether we die today or tomorrow. He went back to his prayers, fingers moving faster over the beads. The transport docked with an orbital station, a massive construct of metal and stone that hung in the void like a Gothic cathedral someone had launched into space. From there, Saitama was moved to a ship, and not just any ship. The vessel was enormous, easily the size of a city, maybe bigger. Its hull was covered in architecture that made no sense, spires rising from the metal like this was a building rather than a spacecraft, every surface covered in religious iconography. Skulls the size of houses, eagles with wings spread wide, prayers etched in letters 10 feet tall. The ship hummed with power, a deep vibration that he could feel through the deck plates. Saitama was led through corridors that stretched for what felt like miles, each one lined with more religious imagery. Candles burned in alcoves, tended by servitors, those half-human cyborgs he'd seen on the station. The things gave him the creeps, lobotomized humans with their brains replaced by machines, their bodies augmented with mechanical parts, turned into living tools. They moved through the corridors with shambling gaits, performing their tasks with mechanical precision, dead eyes staring at nothing. Past the servitors, past priests in red robes who chanted prayers to machines in binary code, past armoured soldiers who looked bigger than any human had the right to be, easily 7 feet tall in their power armour, carrying weapons that could probably level buildings. The soldiers watched him pass with inscrutable expressions behind their helmets. Finally, after what felt like an hour of walking, Saitama was brought to a room. It was sparse, almost ascetic. A single table made of dark wood, polished to a mirror shine. 2 chairs, equally simple. The walls were bare metal, unpainted. One wall was completely transparent. Some kind of advanced glass or force field showing the broken planet below. Cadia spun slowly in the void, and even from orbit Saitama could see the cracks, the gaping wounds that split continents. He could see the purple-red glow emanating from those cracks, the warp bleeding through into reality. Saitama sat down in one of the chairs and waited, because there wasn't much else to do. The chair was uncomfortable, designed for someone much larger than him, and his feet didn't quite touch the floor. He spent a few minutes just looking at the planet, thinking about how depressing it all was before boredom set in. Then he just sat there, hands folded on the table, mind wandering to thoughts of grocery sales and whether Genos was okay. 6 hours later, the door opened with a pneumatic hiss, and Gregor Eisenhorn entered the interrogation chamber like a man walking into a battlefield, every sense alert, every muscle ready to react. Eisenhorn had been an Inquisitor for over 100 years. Though he looked perhaps 60, his aging slowed by Juvenat treatments and augmetics. He wore a long coat of dark leather, reinforced with armor plates, over practical combat clothing. His face was hard, lined with scars both visible and hidden, eyes the color of iron. At his hip hung a bolt pistol, and opposite it, a force sword wrapped in psychic wards. He'd fought corruption and heresy and the enemies of mankind across dozens of worlds, faced chaos sorcerers who could twist reality with a word, demon princes who could shatter mountains, and horrors that would have driven lesser men to madness or suicide. In his century of service, he'd seen things that defied explanation, witnessed miracles and atrocities in equal measure. But the reports from Cadia troubled him in a way few things did anymore, stirred something in his gut that his rational mind tried to dismiss but his instinct screamed was important. The man sitting in the chair looked ordinary, completely, utterly ordinary. Bald head, blank expression, wearing a yellow jumpsuit that wouldn't look out of place on a sanitation worker, or maybe a particularly enthusiastic fitness enthusiast. Nothing about him screamed danger. No visible weapons, no armor, no augmetics. He looked like someone you'd pass on the street without a second glance. Except he'd destroyed Kabanda, one of Khorne's greatest champions, with a backhand. With a backhand. Eisenhorn had faced Kabanda once, decades ago, and it had taken a full squad of Grey Knights, the Imperium's demon hunting specialists, to banish the creature. It had been a brutal fight that left 3 knights dead and the others crippled. And this man had done it alone, casually, like swatting an insect. Eisenhorn sat down across from Saitama, his movements controlled and deliberate. His psychic senses, honed over decades of training and combat, reached out to probe the stranger's mind. A gentle touch that most people wouldn't even notice. It was second nature by now, an automatic response to any unknown threat. He touched the edge of where Saitama's consciousness should be, and found nothing. Not the null void of a blank, those soulless individuals who cancelled out the warp and made psychers physically ill. Not a psyker hiding their power behind mental shields. Just nothing. It was like the man didn't exist in any psychic dimension at all. Like he was a hole in reality shaped like a person. Eisenhorn pulled back his senses, troubled. That shouldn't be possible. Everything with a consciousness had some presence in the warp, some reflection in that churning sea of souls and emotions. "My name is Gregor Eisenhorn," he said carefully, keeping his voice neutral and professional. "I am an Inquisitor of the Ordo Genos. My duty is to investigate threats to humanity, both Xenos and otherwise. I need to understand what you are and why you're here. Let's start simple. Who are you?" "I'm Saitama. I'm a hero." "A hero?" Eisenhorn let the word hang in the air for a moment, testing its weight. In the Imperium, the word hero meant something specific. Saints who performed miracles in the Emperor's name, chapter masters who held the line against impossible odds, Lord Generals who won wars through brilliance and sacrifice, not someone in a yellow jumpsuit. "And where are you from, Saitama?" City Z, Earth, Japan specifically, though I've fought monsters all over. Tokyo mostly. Sometimes the countryside if something big shows up there. Earth. Eisenhorn leaned back slightly, processing. Terror, you mean? Holy terror. The throne world. No, just Earth. Regular Earth. Saitama looked genuinely confused now. With regular problems. Well, regular for me. Lots of monsters and villains, stuff like that. Every week, sometimes more. The Hero Association sends us alerts on our phones when something shows up. Eisenhorn studied the man's face, looking for signs of deception, madness, corruption. He found none. Saitama spoke with the casual honesty of someone describing their daily commute. Either he was the best liar Eisenhorn had ever encountered, or he was telling what he believed to be the truth. Eisenhorn activated a hololithic display built into the table, and images appeared above the polished wood, flickering to life in shades of blue and green. First, maps of the galaxy, the segmentum solar at the center, glowing brightest, the other segmenta spreading out in all directions, hundreds of thousands of worlds, billions of humans, all under the Imperium's control or protection. Then the images changed, showing war. Chaos Space Marines in corrupted armor storming through streets, bolters firing, citizens screaming, Tyranid hive fleets descending on worlds like locusts, bioships blotting out the sun, orc wars spreading like wildfires, green tide consuming everything in their path, necrons rising from tombs older than humanity, death rays reducing soldiers to atoms. Each image was accompanied by casualty numbers. Millions dead, tens of millions, hundreds of millions. The numbers scrolled past, meaningless in their enormity. "This is the galaxy you now inhabit," Eisenhorn explained, his voice taking on the tone of a teacher delivering a particularly grim lecture. "For 10,000 years, since the Emperor ascended to the Golden Throne, humanity has fought for survival against forces that seek to destroy, corrupt, or consume us. Every day, billions die in wars you cannot imagine. Entire worlds are lost. Civilizations are erased. This is the Imperium of Man, humanity's last bastion against extinction." He paused, letting the weight of the words settle. "We are not winning. We are merely surviving. And some days, even that feels optimistic." Saitama watched the images play out, his usual bored expression slowly changing. His eyes narrowed, tracking the hololith images with focus he rarely showed. His mouth pressed into a thin line, the corners turning down slightly. When he spoke, his voice was quieter than before, stripped of its usual casual tone. "This whole galaxy is like this? Every single day?" "Yes." "For 10,000 years?" "Yes. Since the Horus Heresy. Since the Emperor was entombed on the Golden Throne, neither fully alive nor fully dead, sustained only by the sacrifice of 1,000 souls daily." Eisenhorn watched Saitama's face carefully, gauging his reaction. Saitama was quiet for a long moment, staring at the hololithic displays as they cycled through more scenes of war and death. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, serious in a way Eisenhorn hadn't heard yet. "That's really depressing. Back home we get monster attacks, but it's not like this. There are breaks, days when nothing happens, time to rebuild. People have normal lives between the attacks. This is just endless. No breaks, no hope, just war forever." Eisenhorn noted the reaction carefully. Genuine emotion. The stranger actually cared about the suffering he was seeing. That was either very good or very dangerous, and Eisenhorn had lived long enough to know that the two often went hand in hand. "I need to understand what you are," he said, leaning forward slightly. "The reports say you destroyed a greater demon of Khorne with a casual strike. Ka'Bandha, one of the mightiest champions of the Blood God. It takes squads of Grey Knights to banish him, and even then, casualties are expected. Is this true? Can you confirm this happened?" "If that's what that big red angry thing was, then yeah. I hit it and it exploded." "How?" Saitama shrugged, the kind of casual shrug someone might give when asked about their workout routine. "I trained really hard, did 100 push-ups, 100 sit-ups, 100 squats, and ran 10 kilometers every single day for 3 years. No air conditioning in summer, no heat in winter. Never skip a day even if you're sick. Eventually, I got really strong. Lost all my hair, but I got really strong. Eisenhorn stared at him, his decades of experience trying to process what he'd just heard. That's not possible. Physical training alone cannot grant the power to destroy greater demons. There must be something else. Psychic potential, genetic modification, divine intervention. I know, right? My disciple says the same thing. Genos thinks there's some kind of secret to my power. But there's not. I just trained really hard and something changed. Broke my limiter, maybe. I'm not really sure about the science. The Inquisitor realized he needed a different approach. Theoretical discussions weren't going to answer the questions he needed answered. I need to test something. Understand your capabilities empirically. Will you come with me? It's not an interrogation, more of a practical assessment. They descended deeper into the ship, down through layers of corridors and cargo bays and maintenance shafts, until they reached the training decks. These were massive chambers designed specifically for the Adeptus Astartes, the Space Marines, genetically enhanced super soldiers who served as humanity's finest warriors. The ceiling was 100 feet high, supported by pillars thick as redwoods. The floor was reinforced adamantium, designed to withstand bolter-fire and power weapon strikes. Training equipment lined the walls, massive weights that would take 3 normal men to lift, combat servitors built to withstand punishment, targeting ranges that stretched into the distance. 3 Space Marines waited in the center of the deck, their power armor humming with contained energy. Brother Captain Uriel Ventris of the Ultramarines 4th Company stood at the center, his armor painted in the traditional blue and gold of his chapter. At his sides stood his battle brothers Pausanias and Lurkus. Each stood over 7 feet tall in their armor, encased in ceramite plates that could withstand anti-tank weapons. They carried weapons that could punch through vehicle armor, power fists crackling with disruptive energy fields. Ventris stepped forward as Eisenhorn and Saitama approached, his helmet maglocked to his hip, revealing a face that was handsome in a harsh way, with short-cropped blonde hair and eyes the blue of Terra's oceans. Inquisitor Eisenhorn, you said you needed us to test an individual. We've prepared the training deck accordingly. His voice was deep, resonant, carrying the confidence of someone who'd fought for centuries and survived. Yes, this is Saitama. I need you to determine his combat capabilities. Use whatever force you deem necessary. Don't hold back. Ventris looked at the bald man in the yellow suit, his enhanced eyes taking in every detail. No armor, no visible weapons, no augmetics. He appeared to be an ordinary human, maybe slightly below average height, with an unremarkable build. With respect, Inquisitor, he appears to be an unaugmented baseline human. Are you certain you wish us to proceed? We could seriously injure him. I'm certain. Trust me, Captain. He can handle it. The Space Marines moved with the precision of warriors who'd fought together for decades, their movements coordinated through centuries of training and combat. They spread out, forming a triangle around Saitama, each taking a position that would allow them to strike from a different angle while covering their battle brothers. Pausanias moved first, a testing strike with his power fist, a gauntlet crackling with energy that could punch through tank armor. The strike was fast, faster than a normal human could react to, aimed at Saitama's center mass. Saitama sidestepped it easily, his movement casual and unhurried, like he was avoiding a puddle on the sidewalk. Wait, why are we fighting? Saitama asked, his voice genuinely confused as he dodged another strike. Lurkus had come from behind, sweeping low with a leg strike designed to take out his knees. Saitama hopped over it without looking back. Aren't we on the same side? The Inquisitor guy said we're all fighting chaos or whatever. Lurkus pressed the attack, transitioning from the failed sweep into a rising uppercut. Saitama leaned back, the power fist passing an inch from his nose. Ventris struck from the front, a straight punch with enough force behind it to crater a wall. The kind of strike that had felled orc war bosses and Tyranid warriors. Saitama caught it with one hand. The impact produced a shockwave that rolled across the training deck like a physical thing. Reinforced adamantium tiles cracked under their feet, fractures spreading outward in spiderweb patterns. The pillars supporting the ceiling shuddered. The entire ship groaned, its structure protesting the sudden stress. Ventris felt the impact travel up his arm, felt his armor's shock absorbers engage and fail, felt bones that should have shattered somehow remain intact. But his fist wouldn't move. It was locked in place, held by a grip stronger than any vice, more unyielding than any material he'd encountered. He tried to pull back, servos in his armor whining with effort. Nothing. It was like his fist had been welded in place. "You guys hit pretty hard," Saitama said conversationally, examining Ventris's fist like it was something mildly interesting. "Are you some kind of super soldiers? The armor's pretty cool. Reminds me of this villain I fought once. Metal Knight. He had powered armor too, though his was more techie looking." "Captain?" Pausanias raised his weapon, unsure whether to fire. "Stand down," Ventris ordered, his voice tight. Centuries of combat experience screamed warnings at him. This wasn't a test anymore. This was survival. The being holding his fist could have killed all three of them before they'd even registered he'd moved. Every instinct honed through decades of warfare told him that. "Release me. Please." "Oh, sorry." Saitama let go, his expression apologetic. "I didn't mean to grab so hard." Then he gave Ventris a gentle push, the kind of push you might give a friend to get their attention. Gentle by Saitama's standards. Ventris flew backward. Literally flew, his armoured boots leaving the deck, his body horizontal in the air, sliding across the training deck in a shower of sparks as his armour scraped against adamantium. He crashed into the far wall hard enough to leave a man-shaped dent in the reinforced metal, but his armour had absorbed most of the impact. He slid down the wall and landed on his feet, systems check running automatically in his helmet display. No serious damage, no injuries. The being had pushed him hard enough to send him flying across a room, but had somehow calibrated the force to avoid actually hurting him. Saitama looked worried, actually worried for the first time since the fight started. "Are you okay? I barely pushed you. Did I push too hard? I'm really sorry if I pushed too hard." Ventris crossed the deck, his steps heavy in the power armor. He stopped in front of Eisenhorn and removed his helmet, revealing an expression of deep concern mixed with awe. Inquisitor. This being could have killed all three of us before we registered he'd moved. He's holding back. Constantly. Every movement, every action, he's restraining himself to a degree I can barely comprehend. The push that sent me across the deck was probably less force than I used to open a door. Eisenhorn nodded slowly, his suspicions confirmed. "Thank you, Captain. That will be all. You may return to your duties." Back in the interrogation chamber, the lights of Cadia's orbital facilities glittered in the viewport behind them. Eisenhorn made a decision that would change everything. He'd been an Inquisitor long enough to know when he was dealing with something beyond his usual scope, something that required honesty rather than manipulation. He deactivated all recording devices in the room with a thought, his neural implants interfacing with the ship's systems. What he was about to say couldn't be on any official record. "Our Imperium is dying," he said bluntly, his voice stripped of any diplomatic softening. "Chaos grows stronger with each passing year. The Great Rift has split the galaxy in half. Xenos close in from all sides. The forces of darkness chip away at humanity's holdings, world by world, system by system. I've fought for over a century and I've never seen it this bad. When I started my service, we talked about winning, about pushing back the darkness. Now we talk about holding the line, and some days even that feels optimistic." Saitama listened, his expression serious in that way it rarely became. "But I've also never seen power like yours." Eisenhorn leaned forward, his iron eyes locked on Saitama's face. "You destroyed Kabanda. You held off 3 space marines without effort, without breaking a sweat, without even trying. I believe you could make a difference here, a real, tangible difference. The kind that saves worlds, maybe sectors." "I just want to go home," Saitama said quietly, and for the first time Eisenhorn heard real emotion in his voice. Not anger or fear, just exhaustion, homesickness. "I don't belong here. This isn't my world, my galaxy, my fight. I have a life back home. People who need me. My disciple Genos is probably losing his mind right now. I understand, and I will help you return. I swear it on my authority as an Inquisitor, on my honor, on whatever oath you need to hear." Eisenhorn activated another hologram, this one showing a different world. Armageddon, a hive world covered in massive cities and factories, its surface a patchwork of industrial zones and urban sprawl. Currently the world was covered in green, not the green of forests or fields, the green of orc skin. But first, help us win one battle, one impossible battle. Then I'll use every resource at my disposal, every forbidden technology, every piece of archaeotech I can requisition to send you home. I'll drain Forge worlds if I have to. I'll petition the High Lords themselves. The hologram zoomed in, showing the scale of the invasion more clearly. Millions of orcs, perhaps tens of millions, maybe more. They covered the landscape like a living carpet, their crude fortifications and war machines stretching to the horizon. Every hive city on the planet was under siege. Smoke rose from 100 battlefronts. "This is the third war for Armageddon," Eisenhorn explained, his voice taking on the cadence of a briefing. "The orc war boss Ghazghkull Mag Uruk Thraka has returned with the largest war in Imperial history. He attacked Armageddon once before, decades ago. Commissar Yarrick drove him off barely, but Ghazghkull learned, adapted. Now he's back with an army that makes his first invasion look like a scouting party. Millions of orcs, dozens of gargants, hundreds of war machines. They're besieging every hive city on the planet. Commissar Yarrick leads the defense, but even he is being pushed back. Armageddon has held for months, but the walls are cracking. The defenses are failing. We're losing." The images showed the scale of the disaster. Human soldiers firing laser guns until the barrels melted, tanks burning, cities on fire, and through it all the green tide advancing, unstoppable, inevitable. "We're losing," Eisenhorn repeated, and the admission seemed to pain him. Armageddon will fall unless something changes, unless someone changes the equation, that someone could be you. Saitama studied the images in silence, watching the holographic soldiers fight and die, watching the cities burn. He saw families huddling in shelters, saw soldiers holding positions they knew they couldn't keep, saw people who had no hope but fought anyway, because the alternative was worse. His expression was hard to read, but his eyes were focused in a way they rarely were. "One battle?" he asked finally. "One battle. Win us one impossible battle. Give Armageddon a chance to survive. Then you go home with my full support and every resource I can muster." Saitama was quiet for a moment longer, his eyes still on the holographic images. Then he nodded, just once, a simple, decisive movement. "Okay. Sounds like hero work anyway. And those people need help." The Thunderhawk gunship screamed through Armageddon's atmosphere like a falling meteor, its engines howling as they fought against gravity and wind resistance. The atmosphere was thick with particulates, the result of centuries of industrial output and months of warfare. Inside the troop bay, Saitama sat on a bench designed for space marines, his feet dangling several inches off the deck because the seats were built for warriors in power armor. Surrounding him were soldiers from the Armageddon Steel Legion, dressed in their distinctive uniforms, thick coats and gas masks that made them look like refugees from some historical war. The rebreathers were necessary on Armageddon, where the air was toxic enough to kill an unprotected human in hours. They wore flak armor under the coats, laser guns clutched in gloved hands, ammunition packs hanging from webbing. These were hardened veterans who'd been fighting orcs for months, men and women who'd seen friends die and positions overrun. Their faces, what Saitama could see of them around the gas masks, were drawn and tired. Eyes that had seen too much stared at nothing in particular. One soldier, a man whose name tape read Peterson, kept checking his laser gun over and over, ejecting the power pack, checking the connections, reinserting it, cycling the action. His hands shook slightly with each movement. He'd done this same check 5 times since they'd boarded. Another soldier, a woman with sergeant stripes, sat with her eyes closed, lips moving in silent prayer. Her fingers traced the symbol of the Aquila, the 2-headed eagle of the Imperium, on a pendant around her neck. The pendant was worn smooth from years of handling. A third soldier, younger than the others, maybe on his first deployment, just stared at the deck with wide eyes, breathing fast enough that his rebreather mask fogged and cleared rhythmically. "First combat drop?" Peterson asked Saitama, his voice muffled through the rebreather. He'd given up pretending to check his laser gun and was just holding it now, knuckles white around the grip. "First combat drop in space," Saitama replied, trying to make conversation to ease the tension he could feel radiating from everyone in the bay. "I've jumped out of buildings before. Fell from the moon once, that was weird. But yeah, first time doing this whole military thing. This is different." Peterson checked his laser gun again, the 6th time. "We're going into Hive Hades' northern front. The Orcs broke through the outer defences yesterday. Overran 3 regiments. Command estimates 3 million of them between us and the Hive. 3 million. That's not counting the ones inside the breach or the reserves they keep bringing up from the rear." 3 million? Saitama considered this, his expression thoughtful. "That might actually be a workout. Back home, the biggest fight I had was against the Deep Sea King. There was only one of him, but he was pretty strong. Took a serious punch." Peterson laughed, a sound with absolutely no humour in it, the kind of laugh that came from exhaustion and fear and acceptance of death. "We're all going to die, probably in the first wave. Orcs don't take prisoners, they just kill and kill and kill until there's nothing left." "Probably not," Saitama said with complete confidence. "You've got me this time. I'm pretty good at dealing with large groups." The pilot's voice crackled over the Vox system, distorted by static and distance. 60 seconds to landing zone. All personnel prepare for combat deployment. Emperor protect us all." The prayer at the end sounded automatic, rote, the kind of thing said because it was expected rather than because anyone believed it would help. Through the small armor-glass viewport set into the hull, Saitama could see the battlefield approaching. It stretched to the horizon and beyond, a seething mass of green bodies that moved like a living thing. Orcs. Millions of them, just like Peterson had said. Maybe more. They covered every visible surface, packed so tightly that individual bodies blurred together into a green tide. Crude vehicles carved paths through the mass, battle wagons the size of houses belching black smoke from engines that should not work but did through sheer orc belief. Gargants, massive walking war machines that towered over the battlefield like mobile fortresses, stomped through the horde. Each footfall crushed a dozen orcs, but more swarmed to take their place. Imperial defensive lines were barely visible, thin ribbons of sandbags and prefabricated walls, laser guns firing in constant streams that looked like red threads trying to hold back an ocean. Artillery landed among the orcs, shells exploding in flowers of fire and shrapnel, but the orcs just kept coming, climbing over their own dead, driven by the psychic gestalt field that linked them all together. The War. The thing that made orcs more than just dangerous aliens. The thing that made them a galactic threat. The Thunderhawk landed hard, its landing strut slamming into cratered ground with enough force to rattle teeth. The rear ramp dropped immediately, hydraulics screaming, revealing a wall of smoke and noise and chaos. "Go, go, go!" the pilot screamed over the Vox, and the Steel Legion squad rushed out, years of training overriding terror, boots hitting dirt, spreading into defensive positions. They took cover behind the wreckage of a destroyed Lehman Russ battle tank, its turret blown clean off, its hull blackened by fire. Saitama followed at a casual walk, hands in his pockets, cape fluttering behind him. The sound hit him first, even before he'd fully descended the ramp. It was overwhelming in a way that made City Z's monster attacks seem quiet by comparison. Guns firing, thousands of them, creating a constant roar like standing next to a waterfall made of violence. Artillery booming, each shell creating thunder, orcs roaring. Millions of voices joined in a war cry that was as much psychic as physical. Men screaming, some in defiance, some in pain, some in pure terror. Engines revving, metal screeching against metal. The ground itself seemed to shake with the violence, trembling with each artillery impact, and underneath it all, barely audible but somehow pervasive, was a low, thrumming sound that Saitama realized was the War field itself, the psychic energy of millions of orcs all focused on one thing: war. An officer spotted Saitama immediately, did a double take that would have been comical under different circumstances. The officer was a commissar identified by the peaked cap and long coat, holding a bolt pistol in one hand and a power sword in the other. His coat was burned in places, his face covered in soot and blood that might have been his own or might have been someone else's. "Who the hell are you?" His voice was hoarse from shouting orders. "Where's your armor? Your weapon? Your rebreather?" He grabbed Saitama's shoulder with the hand holding the bolt pistol, the barrel of the gun pressing against Saitama's chest. "Get to cover before you get yourself killed, you idiot. This isn't a parade ground." An orc mob chose that moment to charge, emerging from the smoke like something from a nightmare. 20 of them, green-skinned brutes standing 6 to 7 feet tall, muscles like corded steel under leathery skin. They wore scraps of armor bolted directly to their bodies, rusty metal plates held in place by crude surgery. Some carried crude guns, shooter that sprayed bullets in random directions. Others wielded choppers, axes and swords made from scrap metal, but sharp enough to cut through steel. They saw Saitama standing in the open, saw prey and roared with delight. Orcs loved nothing more than a good fight, and this looked like it might be entertaining before they killed him. "Contact! Orcs 20 meters!" The commissar raised his bolt pistol, training kicking in despite the fear. A bolt pistol could blow a man in half with a single shot. Against orcs, it took precision and luck. Saitama sighed, the kind of deep sigh that spoke of infinite weariness. Here we go again. He'd fought monsters back home regularly. Different faces, same basic problem. Things that wanted to hurt people, things that needed to be stopped. He bent his knees slightly, a minuscule movement that looked like he was just shifting his weight, his right hand clenched into a fist. Then he punched the ground. Not a full power punch, not even close. If he'd used full power, he'd probably crack the planet. Just a casual punch, the kind he'd use on a low-level threat. His fist connected with the earth, and the shockwave expanded outward like a nuclear explosion. The orcs directly in front of him simply ceased to exist, their bodies atomized by the pressure wave, reduced to component atoms. The ones beyond them were launched into the air, spinning like leaves in a hurricane, tumbling end over end. The ground itself cratered, forming a perfect circle that expanded outward, dirt and stone and debris thrown up in a wave. The shock wave continued rolling across the battlefield, an invisible wave of force that picked up everything in its path. Thousands of orcs were sent flying, their bodies ragdolling through the air. Battle wagons flipped end over end, their crude engines exploding. Even the gargants stumbled, their massive legs buckling as the ground beneath them shattered. The wave reached the hive city walls a mile away, and even those massive structures shuddered from the impact, dust falling from ancient stonework. Then silence fell across the battlefield, sudden and complete. The constant roar of gunfire stopped. The artillery fell silent. The orc war cries cut off mid-shout. Imperial soldiers stopped firing, fingers frozen on triggers. Orcs stopped charging, their simple minds trying to process what had just happened. Everyone on both sides of the conflict, human and Xenos alike, stared at the massive crater and the bald man standing at its center, his fist still pressed against the ground, his expression mildly annoyed. Saitama looked at his fist, flexing his fingers. "Huh. Guess I overdid it a little. I was trying to go easy." From the command bunker carved into the hive city's outer wall, Commissar Yarrick watched through magnoculars, his hands gripping the ancient device so tightly that the metal housing creaked. His one human eye was wide, the pupil contracted to a pinpoint. His augmetic eye cycled through different viewing modes automatically, trying to make sense of what he'd just witnessed. Thermal imaging showed a massive heat signature where the punch had landed. Electromagnetic showed nothing, which was wrong because an explosion that large should have electromagnetic components. Even his warp sight mode, the one he rarely used because seeing the warp directly was maddening, showed only a void, a hole in reality. The man was a blank spot in every spectrum that mattered. "Get me," he said slowly, his voice tight with barely controlled emotion. "Inquisitor Eisenhorn on the Vox. Now. Immediately. Priority override." The Vox operator, a young woman with her hands shaking as she worked the controls, fumbled with the equipment. "Sir, he's in orbit. There's a 3-second delay on Vox communications due to atmospheric interference and distance. I don't care if there's a 10-second delay. Get him. Yarrick didn't lower the magnoculars, couldn't stop watching the crater, watching the bald man dust off his gloves like he'd just finished some minor chore. Eisenhorn's voice crackled through the Vox system 3 seconds later, distorted by static but clear enough. "Report, Commissar. How is the asset performing?" "Sir, the asset," Yarrick had to pause, had to take a breath and steady himself, "just eliminated approximately 10,000 orcs with a single strike. The crater is half a mile across. He punched the ground and 10,000 orcs died. Just died. Gone. Atomized." Pause. The 3-second delay felt like an eternity. "Confirmed?" Eisenhorn's voice was carefully neutral. "You're certain of this assessment?" "Confirmed. I'm watching the crater right now. I'm watching my Auspex readings that say this shouldn't be possible. I'm watching my seismographs that registered the impact as equivalent to a tactical nuclear device. And I'm watching that man standing in the middle of it all looking bored." Another pause, longer this time. When Eisenhorn spoke again, his voice carried a weight that Yarrick recognized, the weight of knowledge that couldn't be shared. "Be advised, Commissar, that's not his full power. He's still holding back. Be very careful about how you deploy him. Point him at the enemy and get your men clear." Yarrick lowered the magnoculars slowly, processing that information. In 70 years of warfare, fighting Ghazghkull across a dozen worlds, losing his arm and his eye, and nearly losing his life 100 times, becoming a legend among both humans and orcs, he had never felt genuine awe. Fear, yes. Respect for worthy enemies, certainly. But awe, the kind of bone-deep awe that made you question everything you knew? Never. Until now. "Understood, sir," adjusting deployment accordingly. The ground trembled, not from artillery or explosions, but from footsteps, heavy footsteps that shook the earth with each impact, rhythmic and purposeful. The orc horde parted like a curtain being drawn back, green bodies scrambling aside, some of them being trampled by their own in the rush to get out of the way. And through the gap, something massive emerged. Ghazghkull Mag Uruk Thraka, the great beast, the prophet of the War. Standing over 20 feet tall in his custom mega armor, a suit of powered armor that had been built by the best mech boys the orc race had produced, then upgraded and modified over decades of warfare. Plates of adamantium stolen from Imperial tanks had been welded to his body, covering him from head to toe. His jaw had been replaced with a massive bionic device, after Yarrick shot the original one off during their first encounter. The bionic jaw was covered in spikes and moved with pneumatic hisses. His eyes burned with an intelligence that was terrifying in an orc, a cunning that had allowed him to unite millions of orcs under his banner. This wasn't just a war boss, this was a legend, a monster who'd fought across hundreds of worlds, who'd killed chapter masters and lord generals, who'd turned entire sectors into war zones and forced the Imperium to divert resources from other critical fronts just to contain him. And he was laughing. The sound boomed across the battlefield, amplified by voxcasters built into his armor, a deep rumbling laugh that was somehow more threatening than any roar. "So used to git, that's crumpin' my boys." His voice was thunder-given words, each syllable like an artillery shell. "Good. This was getting boring. I needs a proper scrap. Something that makes me think." Saitama looked up at the massive orc, craning his neck to see the top of Ghazghkull's armor. He'd fought big opponents before. Beefcake had been huge. The Deep-Sea King had been tall. But this was different. This wasn't just size for intimidation. This was a weapon. Every inch of Ghazghkull was covered in guns, blades, or armor. Power claws the size of cars hung from his arms. Shooter were built into his shoulders. Rockets nestled in launch tubes on his back. "Oh, you're the boss. Nice to meet you. You're pretty big. Do you need to be that big, or is it a personal choice?" Ghazghkull charged. Each footstep left craters in the dirt, his massive weight creating tremors that could be felt a mile away. His power claw raised high, hydraulics screaming as they drove the weapon forward. The claw was a massive mechanical pincer crackling with energy, each finger ending in a point sharp enough to punch through tank armor. It had torn through Space Marine armor, crushed dreadnoughts, ripped apart buildings. When it closed on you, you were done. That was the law of the battlefield. In the command bunker, Yarrick stood, his chair falling backward and clattering against stone. No, not again, not here, not now. His voice was strangled, desperate. He'd fought Ghazghkull before, lost to him before, watched good soldiers die trying to stop him, watched cities burn, watched worlds fall. And now this monster was charging at the one thing that might actually save Armageddon, the one asset that had performed a miracle. Artillery! Target coordinates, --. Stand down, Eisenhorn's voice cut through the vox like a knife, sharp and commanding. Do not interfere, do not fire, do not do anything. But sir, Ghazghkull will... Commissar Yarrick, trust me, watch and learn. Ghazghkull swung his power claw down with enough force to level a building, enough force to crater the ground, enough force to kill anything that walked on two legs. The blow descended with the inevitability of a meteor strike. The ground where Saitama stood should have become a crater filled with paste. Instead, metal screeched. Ghazghkull's power claw connected with Saitama's head and shattered. Not broke, not bent. Shattered. Adamantium fragments flew in all directions, each piece spinning through the air, trailing sparks. Hydraulic lines burst, spraying pressurized oil in golden arcs. Pneumatic systems exploded, releasing compressed air with sounds like gunshots. The warboss stumbled back, his massive frame off balance for the first time in decades, staring at the ruined stump of his weapon in genuine confusion. His mind, one of the most cunning in the orc race, tried to process what had just happened. He'd hit something. The something hadn't moved. His weapon had destroyed itself on contact. That shouldn't be possible. That violated every law of physics and warfare he understood. Saitama hadn't moved, hadn't even flinched. His head was exactly where it had been, tilted slightly upward to look at Ghazghkull, his expression one of mild interest. That tickled a little, he said, his voice conversational. You're pretty strong, stronger than most things I've fought. That's nice. It's been a while since something made me feel anything. My turn. He threw a punch. Not a full power punch, not a serious punch, not even close to his maximum. Just a casual jab, the kind he'd use to knock out a tiger-level threat back home, a punch that barely registered on his personal scale of force. His fist connected with Ghazghkull's chest plate, right in the center where the thickest armor was, where adamantium stolen from a dozen Imperial tanks had been welded together. For a brief moment, nothing happened. For one heartbeat, the universe seemed to pause, reality taking a moment to process the contradiction of so much force delivered through such a simple motion. Then Ghazghkull flew backward. The prophet of the War, the great beast, the orc who had brought entire sectors to their knees, flew through the air like a toy thrown by an angry child. He tumbled through his own army, his armoured body crushing orcs beneath it, carving a trench through the battlefield 100 yards long. His trajectory carried him over the heads of his boys, over the battle wagons, over the crude fortifications. He flew for miles, his body shrinking to a dot in the distance, finally crashing into a mountain on the horizon. The impact was visible even from the battlefield, a flash of light and a plume of dust that rose thousands of feet into the air. The sound of the impact arrived seconds later, a rolling boom like thunder. The mountain shuddered, and then an avalanche began, millions of tons of rock and snow cascading down, burying the impact site under geological weight. Saitama flexed his fist, opening and closing his fingers. Huh, he's tougher than most. I actually felt that one. Not much, but something. That's rare. The orc horde stood frozen. A million green faces turned toward where their boss had been, then toward where their boss had gone, then back to the bald man in the yellow suit. The psychic gestalt field that bound them together, that fed on violence and made them stronger, shattered like glass. The War, that intangible force that made orcs more than the sum of their parts, collapsed. Without it, they were just individual orcs, confused, and suddenly aware that their boss, the biggest and baddest orc in the galaxy, had just been punched into a mountain. Then they ran. 3 million orcs turned and fled. It started with the ones closest to Saitama, the ones who'd felt the wind from his punch. They turned and ran, and that triggered a cascade. More orcs turned, then more. Within minutes, the entire horde was retreating, a green tide flowing backward. Battle wagons reversed, their drivers stomping on pedals without understanding why, just knowing they needed to go. Death Dreads stumbled away, mechanical legs carrying them from the battlefield. Even the Gargants, those massive war machines, turned and walked off, their drivers overcome by the instinctive knowledge that staying was death. The great War collapsed in minutes, dissolving like mist under sunlight. 3 million orcs, the largest concentration of Xenos ever assembled on Armageddon, scattered to the winds. Imperial forces stood in stunned silence for a long moment. Then someone cheered, one voice hoarse and cracking, screaming praise to the Emperor. Then another voice joined, then 10, then 100. Within seconds, the entire front line was erupting in celebration. Soldiers who'd been fighting for weeks, who'd lost friends and family, who'd expected to die on this battlefield, screamed prayers to the Emperor and fired their laser guns into the air. Some fell to their knees, weeping, others embraced, Commissar codes of conduct temporarily forgotten in the moment. Artillery crews abandoned their guns to cheer. Tank commanders climbed out of their hatches to see the battlefield with their own eyes, unable to believe the Vox reports. Yarrick walked out of the command bunker in a daze, his feet carrying him without conscious thought. He moved past cheering soldiers, past officers trying to restore order, past medici tending to wounded. He walked across the battlefield, boots crunching on debris and empty shell casings, until he stood in front of Saitama. The old Commissar, legend of the Imperium, hero of Armageddon, the man who'd held the line against impossible odds for decades, removed his peaked cap and held it over his chest in a gesture of respect. His augmetic hand, the power claw taken from an orc warboss, hung limp at his side, the weapon powered down. "In all my years fighting Ghazghkull," he said quietly, his voice barely audible over the distant cheering, "across dozens of worlds, through 3 wars, through ambushes and sieges and desperate last stands, I never thought I'd see this, never imagined it was possible." His human eye, the one that was still flesh and blood, was wet. Yarrick, who hadn't cried since the Second Battle of Armageddon, felt tears on his scarred cheek. "You've saved millions of lives today, bought us time we desperately needed." "Is he dead?" Saitama asked, looking toward the distant mountain where Ghazghkull had impacted. "No. Orcs like him don't die easily. He'll dig himself out of that mountain in a few hours, maybe a day. His armor will be wrecked, his body broken, but he'll heal. Orcs always heal. But you've bought us time. Maybe enough time to fortify our positions, to bring in reinforcements to turn this war around." Yarrick extended his human hand, leaving the augmetic one at his side. "Thank you. From everyone on this world, thank you." Saitama shook the offered hand, his grip gentle, conscious of the old man's age. "Just hero work. It's what I do." In orbit aboard the Assain, Eisenhorn stood in his private sanctum, a room lined with books and artifacts, watching reports flow in on hololithic displays that flickered and updated in real time. Ghazghkull defeated. The War collapsed. Armageddon saved, at least for now. The casualty reports were coming in and the numbers were stunning. Estimated Imperial losses for the day: 200. 200 casualties in a battle that should have killed 10,000. The Orcs had lost approximately 15,000 killed or wounded before they retreated, a rounding error compared to their total numbers, but a devastating blow to their morale and cohesion. Victory. Complete, unambiguous, miraculous victory. His communications officer, a young woman with neural implants visible at her temples, looked up from her station, her expression troubled. "Sir, we're receiving reports from astropaths across the sector. Something is wrong with the warp. The storms are intensifying. Several ships have been lost in transit. Astropaths are reporting increased difficulty maintaining communications. The warp is churning." "Show me!" Eisenhorn's voice was flat, emotionless, but inside, cold dread was settling into his stomach. Holographic displays appeared, showing the Immaterium that parallel dimension ships travelled through for faster-than-light travel. Warp storms, the tears in reality that occurred naturally, were growing more violent, more chaotic, expanding, and all of them, every single one in the sector, was centered on Armageddon. They radiated outward from the planet like ripples from a stone dropped in a pond. Eisenhorn's blood ran cold as he watched the displays update. He'd suspected this might happen, had hoped he was wrong, had prayed to the Emperor that his fears were unfounded. But he'd lived too long and seen too much to believe in coincidences. Saitama's presence was destabilizing the warp itself. Every time he fought, every time he used his power, he created ripples in reality that the warp responded to. And the Chaos Gods, those malevolent entities that ruled the warp, were not pleased. He activated his Vox with a thought, his neural implants connecting directly to the communications system. Get me Craftworld Ulthway emergency protocols. Tell them Inquisitor Eisenhorn requests immediate audience with Farseer Eldrad Ulthran. Priority Alpha. Tell them it concerns the fate of the galaxy. The response came faster than expected, which was itself worrying. The Eldar were a dying race, ancient and powerful, gifted with foresight and psychic abilities that made human psychers look like children playing with matches. For them to respond so quickly meant they'd already seen this coming, already known what would happen. The communications officer worked her controls, establishing the connection through methods that Eisenhorn didn't fully understand and didn't want to. Dealing with Genos was always complicated. Dealing with Eldar was like trying to have a conversation with someone who'd already read the script and kept jumping ahead to the ending. 3 hours later, Eisenhorn stood in a shimmering holographic chamber deep in the Asini, surrounded by technology that mixed human and Genos design in ways that would get him executed if certain factions of the Inquisition found out. The projection of Eldrad Ulthran appeared before him, rendered in perfect detail by Eldar technology far beyond human capability. The Farseer was impossibly old, his face lined with centuries of experience, his eyes holding depths that human eyes couldn't match. He wore robes of intricate design, every thread imbued with psychic wards. His staff, taller than he was, hummed with contained power. When he looked at Eisenhorn, it felt like being examined by something vast and ancient, like standing before an ocean and feeling it look back. Gregor Eisenhorn, Eldrad said softly, his voice carrying harmonics that shouldn't exist in human speech. You meddle with forces beyond your comprehension. I told you this would happen, warned you, showed you the possible futures, and yet you proceeded anyway. The being we brought to Armageddon saved the world, millions of lives preserved, the Orc threat neutralized for months, maybe years. Eisenhorn kept his voice level, professional, but he couldn't quite hide the defensiveness. He has doomed it, and perhaps your entire Imperium along with it. Eldrad's expression was grave, ancient beyond measure. I have seen him in 10,000 visions, walk 10,000 possible futures, and in none of them does your galaxy survive his presence intact. He is a paradox made flesh, a being that should not exist. He has no soul, no presence in the warp, yet he moves through reality as if it were water, leaving ripples that threaten to become tsunamis. Every action he takes rips at the fabric of fate itself, unraveling the threads I have spent millennia weaving. He saved Armageddon. He has doomed Armageddon. You simply haven't seen the consequences yet. Eldrad gestured, and visions appeared around them, terrible visions of possible futures, warp storms consuming entire systems, reality bleeding into the immaterium, demons pouring through cracks in space, entire planets swallowed by the warp. The Chaos Gods are not fools, Eisenhorn. They are ancient beyond human reckoning, powerful beyond human understanding. They cannot corrupt him. His soul, if he even has one, is beyond their reach. They cannot kill him. Their servants shatter against him like waves against stone, so they will destroy everything around him until reality itself collapses. They will rip the galaxy apart trying to remove him, and they do not care how much collateral damage they cause. Already, the warp storms grow, ships are being lost, astropaths are going mad. Soon entire systems will be cut off, then sectors. The Imperium will fragment, and in the chaos, chaos itself will flourish. Eisenhorn closed his eyes, the weight of the words settling on him like physical pressure. He'd been an Inquisitor for over a century. He'd made hard decisions before, condemned worlds, ordered exterminatus, sacrificed millions to save billions, but this was different. This was sending away salvation because salvation itself was poisonous. What do I do? Send him back however you must, whatever the cost, before the dark gods rip your galaxy apart trying to remove him. He is a cancer, a benevolent cancer perhaps, that kills the infections it touches, but a cancer nonetheless, and the treatment will kill the patient. The meeting ended, the hologram dissolving, leaving Eisenhorn alone in his sanctum. He stood in silence for a long time, thinking about duty and sacrifice and the cruel mathematics of survival. Saitama had saved millions of lives today, could save billions more given time. But his very existence was destabilizing the galaxy. Already the Chaos Gods were responding. Already reality was fraying. If Saitama stayed, there might not be a galaxy left to save. Eisenhorn activated his Vox, connecting to his most trusted agents scattered across the ship. Gather every piece of archaeotech we have on dimensional manipulation. Contact Mars. Tell Ghazghkull I need him personally. Tell him it's an alpha-level priority. Tell him I'm cashing in every favor he owes me. His second-in-command, a veteran agent named Ravener, responded over the Vox, his voice synthesized through the life support chair that kept his crippled body alive. Sir, archaeotech of that level is forbidden. Using it could get you declared excommunicate traitorous. You'd be hunted. I know the risks. Do it anyway. We're out of time. On Armageddon's surface, in the aftermath of the battle, Saitama sat on a piece of rubble, eating rations with Steel Legion soldiers who'd finally relaxed around him. They'd stopped seeing him as some terrifying weapon and started seeing him as just a weird bald guy who'd saved their lives. The rations were terrible, compressed nutrition bars that tasted like cardboard mixed with chemicals. But Saitama had eaten worse. Back home, he'd lived on instant noodles and whatever was on sale. This was at least edible, if not enjoyable. The soldiers around him were sharing stories, the adrenaline of survival making them talkative. Someone was passing around a flask of something that smelled like industrial solvent. Someone else was dealing cards for a game Saitama didn't recognize. So, one soldier asked a man named Davies who'd been in the Thunderhawk with him, where do you come from? What forge world makes heroes like you? What kind of training produces that kind of power? I'm from Earth, regular Earth, and I made myself. Just trained really hard for 3 years. Saitama took another bite of the ration bar, chewing slowly. It didn't get better with repeated exposure. Must be a paradise, your Earth, Davies said, his voice wistful. If it can produce someone like you without the Emperor's intervention, without genetic modification or psychic training or divine blessing. What's it like? Your world? Saitama thought about City Z, the apartment buildings with their chipped paint, the supermarkets with their sales, the Hero Association with its rankings and bureaucracy. The monster attacks that were honestly pretty routine at this point, just another aspect of life. It's okay, he said. Pretty normal, actually. We have problems, but nothing like this. Nothing that lasts forever. We have breaks. Peace. People live normal lives most of the time. Normal, Davies laughed, the sound bitter and tired. I can't even imagine normal anymore. I was born on Armageddon during the Second War. I've never known peace. My entire life has been fighting orcs, or preparing to fight orcs, or rebuilding from fighting orcs. Every person I've ever known has died in war. Every place I've ever cared about has burned. Normal sounds like a fairy tale. Before Saitama could respond, a Vox unit crackled to life, the emergency channel cutting through the celebration. All units, be advised. Warp rift opening in grid 779. Brace for demonic incursion. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. The sky tore open with a sound that should not exist. 1 trillion screams compressed into a single moment and stretched across eternity. It was the sound of reality breaking, of the material universe being violated by something fundamentally incompatible with natural law. Green light poured from the wound in space, but not the green of nature or life. This was the green of rot, of decay, of entropy given colour. It was the green of things that had died but refused to stop moving. And with the light came the stench. It hit like a physical blow, making strong men double over and vomit, making gas masks and rebreathers worthless. The smell of rot, of disease, of bodies left in the sun for weeks. The smell of despair made tangible. Plants withered and died, healthy grass turning brown and crumbling to dust in seconds. Metal rusted, weapons and armour suddenly orange and flaking, decades of corrosion happening in heartbeats. Soldiers collapsed, their bodies erupting in boils and lesions, flesh rotting while they still lived. The air itself became thick with disease, with plagues that should not exist, with infections that defied medical understanding. And through the rift came something massive. Typhus the Traveller emerged from the wound in reality like a corpse climbing from a grave. The Herald of Nurgle was a nightmare given form, a fever dream made real. His power armour, once the proud colours of the Death Guard, was fused to his body, no longer equipment but part of his flesh. Rust and filth covered every surface, centuries of decay compressed into a walking monument to entropy. The Destroyer Hive, a swarm of plague flies, each carrying diseases that could kill worlds, buzzed around him in a cloud so thick it obscured details. Where he walked, life died. Not just killed, but unmade, reduced to base components, and then reduced further. His presence was an affront to existence itself. "You are the anomaly." Typhus's voice was a death rattle, the sound of lungs filled with fluid, of a throat choked with phlegm. But it carried across the battlefield with perfect clarity, each word a nail driven into the ears of everyone who heard it. "The anathema to the garden. Grandfather Nurgle sees you, and he does not like what he sees. You do not belong. You have no place in this galaxy. You reject the gifts. You deny the cycle. For that, you will be unmade." Plague clouds expanded from Typhus's form, rolling across the ground like fog made of disease. Soldiers died by the hundreds, their bodies rotting where they stood, flesh sloughing off bones, bones turning to dust. Steel Legion troopers tried to run, but the plague was faster. It caught them mid-stride, turned them to corpses before they could take 3 steps. Saitama stood and walked through the cloud, completely unaffected. The diseases that could kill billions washed over him and found no purchase. His yellow suit didn't even get dirty, the cape fluttering clean behind him. He looked at Typhus with an expression of genuine distaste, his nose wrinkling. "You should really take a shower," he said, his voice carrying clearly despite the screaming and dying. "That's just unhygienic. Don't you have standards, personal grooming, anything?" Typhus raised the Man Reaper, his diamond scythe. It was a weapon forged in the warp, bound with plagues that had killed entire star systems, each molecule of the blade saturated with diseases that defied classification. When it cut, it didn't just wound, it infected, corrupted, spread rot that could not be stopped. He struck Saitama with it, a swing that carried the weight of 10,000 years of hatred. The blade connected, and infections tried to take hold. Plagues that could wipe out civilizations attempted to infect cells. Diseases that existed only in nightmares tried to find purchase in flesh. Nothing happened. Saitama stood there, the Man Reaper pressed against his shoulder, looking mildly annoyed. Typhus struck again, harder, then again. Each hit carried plagues that should have killed anything that lived. Each hit should have reduced Saitama to a puddle of corrupted flesh. Instead, it just made his suit slightly dirty, a small smudge on the yellow fabric. "Are you done?" Saitama asked, patient but clearly losing interest. "I'm getting kind of hungry, and this is taking longer than I thought it would." "Impossible!" Typhus struck harder, faster, his movements becoming frantic. The Herald of Nurgle, who had never known desperation in 10,000 years of service, felt something close to fear. "No mortal can resist the gifts of Nurgle. No flesh can deny the rot. You should be dead. You should be dust." "I'm not resisting anything. You're just not very strong." Saitama looked genuinely puzzled, his head tilted slightly. "Compared to the mosquito girl back home, you're not that impressive. She at least made me bleed a little. You're just gross." Typhus roared, a sound that carried harmonics from the warp and channeled every bit of Nurgle's power he could access. The air turned to pure plague, concentrated disease thick enough to see. Reality itself seemed to rot, the laws of physics breaking down under the weight of entropy. Soldiers a mile away died, their bodies corrupting before they hit the ground. Buildings crumbled, stone rotting like flesh. Even the ground turned to toxic sludge. This was power that could sterilize continents, that could render worlds uninhabitable for millennia. This was the full fury of a demon prince, channeled through a champion who'd killed billions. Saitama sighed, the kind of sigh that preceded action. Okay, that's enough. I'm getting annoyed now. You're killing people, that's not okay. He shifted his stance, feet shoulder-width apart, knees slightly bent. His right fist pulled back, the movement economical and precise. Serious series. Serious punch. The punch didn't look special, just a straightforward strike, textbook form, the kind taught in basic martial arts classes across a million worlds. But when it connected with Typhus, something fundamental broke. The demon prince of Nurgle, herald of the plague god, champion who'd fought for 10,000 years, who'd ended civilizations, who carried the blessings of one of the 4 chaos gods, simply ceased to exist. Not banished back to the warp like Kabanda. Destroyed. His essence was shattered so completely that even the warp screamed in pain. The plague clouds evaporated instantly. The destroyer hive fell dead from the sky, millions of flies dropping like rain. The diseases spreading across the battlefield stopped, their vectors simply gone. The corruption in the ground reversed, healthy soil returning, and in the realm of chaos itself, in the garden of Nurgle where diseases grew like flowers and rot was cultivated like art, Nurgle felt pain for the first time in eons. The plague god, one of the 4 great powers of chaos, staggered in his domain. One of his greatest champions, a being that had taken millennia to create, was simply gone. Not lost, not defeated, erased, removed from existence so thoroughly that even memory of him was fading. Saitama rubbed his fist, flexing his fingers. That one actually made me try a little. These guys are getting tougher. Not much tougher, but a little. That's progress, I guess. Which was the problem? The fact that he'd had to try even a little meant he'd put more force into the universe. More contradiction. More reality-breaking power. And the Chaos Gods were watching. Eisenhorn watched the combat footage from orbit, multiple screens showing different angles and sensor readings. Saitama had destroyed Typhus. Not just defeated him or banished him, completely, utterly destroyed him in a way that shouldn't be possible. The warp readings were off the charts, alarms blaring across every monitoring station. Reality was destabilizing around Armageddon, the fabric of space-time stretching thin. His astropaths were screaming, their minds unable to cope with what they were sensing in the warp. 3 of them had already died, their brains hemorrhaging from the psychic pressure, and from the Eye of Terror, that massive warp storm at the galaxy's edge where the Chaos Gods held dominion. Something vast was stirring. Abaddon the Despoiler was mobilizing his forces. The Black Legion was preparing for war. The Chaos Gods themselves were turning their attention to this sector, to this world, to this one bald man who had rejected their power and destroyed their servants. "We have to send him back," Eisenhorn said to his assembled advisors, his voice heavy with the weight of command. They stood in the strategium, surrounded by hololithic displays and tactical maps. Now, immediately, before they rip the galaxy apart trying to kill him, before the warp consumes us all. How? His chief tech priest asked, a hunched figure more machine than man. The rift that brought him here was random, uncontrolled. We don't have the technology to recreate it. Such devices were lost during the dark age of technology, forbidden for 10,000 years. Yes, we do. Eisenhorn pulled up schematics on the central display, ancient designs, recovered from forbidden archives, covered in warning labels and purity seals. Mars has archaeotech from the dark age of technology, dimensional manipulation devices banned after the Age of Strife because they were too dangerous, too unstable. I'll requisition them under Inquisitorial authority. Chapter Master, you will not interfere. This goes beyond normal protocols. His chief tech priest's mechadendrites twitched nervously, binary code flickering in his optical implants. Inquisitor, those devices are classified Hereticus Maximus. Using them will require power equal to 3 Forge worlds, operating at maximum capacity. 3 Forge worlds. That will drain their reactors completely. Billions will suffer blackouts. Production will cease. The economic impact alone will be catastrophic. Then drain 3 Forge worlds, empty their reactors, plunge them into darkness. I'll take full responsibility. This is more important than economics or convenience, or even the lives that will be lost due to the blackouts. Eisenhorn's voice was hard, inflexible. He'd made his decision. Saitama is too powerful for this galaxy, not because he's weak, but because he's too strong. His presence destabilizes the warp. Every time he fights, he rips at reality. The Chaos Gods cannot accept his existence, and they will burn the galaxy trying to remove him. Better we send him home now, on our terms, than wait for Chaos to destroy everything trying to kill him. It took 3 days to prepare. 3 days during which the warp storms grew worse, consuming the outer reaches of the sector. Ships were lost in the immaterium, entire convoys simply disappearing. Astropaths went mad, their minds shattered by what they sensed in the warp. Reports came in of demon incursions across a dozen worlds. The Chaos Gods were preparing something massive, something that hadn't been seen since the Horus Heresy. Belisarius Cawl, Archmagus of Mars, personally oversaw the construction of the device. The ancient tech priest, over 10,000 years old, his body more machine than anything else, had seen many impossible things in his long life. But this device, this dimensional rift generator, was something even he hesitated to activate. It was built from forbidden schematics, using principles that violated several laws of physics and possibly theology. The device was a ring of machinery half a mile across, bristling with generators and capacitors and technology that hummed with barely contained power. At its center, space itself shimmered, reality thinning in preparation for the rip. Once we turn this on, Cole warned Eisenhorn, his voice a mechanical buzz filtered through a dozen voxcasters. There is no stopping it. The power drain will be immediate and total. 3 Forge worlds will go dark. Reactors will need days to restart. During that time, billions will be without power. Production will cease. Defense grids will fail. People will die from exposure, from medical equipment failing, from 100 other causes. The economic damage will take years to recover from, possibly decades. I understand the cost. Eisenhorn stood before the device, his face illuminated by its glow. Better billions suffer temporarily than the entire galaxy burn permanently. Activate it. On Armageddon, Saitama was called to a landing platform carved into the side of Hive Hades. The city was slowly returning to life, citizens emerging from shelters, soldiers standing down from combat stations. The orcs were gone, scattered, and for the first time in months people dared to hope. Eisenhorn met Saitama on the platform personally, having descended from orbit specifically for this. The Inquisitor looked tired, older than his years, the weight of command heavy on his shoulders. "It's time," Eisenhorn said without preamble. "We've found a way to send you home. The device is ready. We can open a portal back to your universe." Saitama's face lit up with genuine happiness, the first time Eisenhorn had seen him truly smile. "Really? That's great. How long have I been gone? Genos must be worried sick." "By your time? About 5 days. Time flows differently between dimensions. For all we know, you might arrive back home moments after you left." "Man, I hope so. There was this really good sale on cabbage. It would be nice if I could still make it." They boarded a transport and travelled to orbit, to the massive ring of machinery that hung in space like a crown around Armageddon. It pulsed with power, lights running along its length, generators humming with contained energy. At its centre, the shimmer had grown stronger, a thin point of light that was slowly expanding. Eisenhorn and Saitama stood before the portal in an observation chamber, separated from the void by reinforced armour glass. Tech priests worked at control stations, making final adjustments. Belisarius Cawl himself monitored the power flow, his mechadendrites interfacing directly with the machinery. "This will open a portal back to your universe," Eisenhorn explained, gesturing at the device. "The power requirements are immense. We're draining 3 Forge worlds to make this happen. Once you step through, the rift will collapse. The device will be destroyed in the process. There's no coming back. This is permanent." "That's fine. I don't really belong here anyway." Saitama looked at the portal, at the shimmer that was slowly resolving into an image. He could see his apartment on the other side, could see Genos pacing back and forth, see the familiar peeling wallpaper and the television that only got 3 channels. That's home. That's where I need to be. Yarrick appeared, having travelled from Armageddon's surface. The old Commissar stood at attention, his power claw at his side, his cap under his arm. He looked at Saitama with an expression that mixed respect, gratitude, and sadness. "Will you return if we need you?" he asked. "If the orcs come back, if Ghazghkull returns, will you help us again?" Saitama considered the question seriously, his expression thoughtful. "Probably not. This isn't my galaxy. You have your own heroes, your own soldiers, your own way of doing things, but you guys are pretty tough. You've been fighting for 10,000 years without me. You'll be fine." Eisenhorn extended his hand, offering it to Saitama. "Thank you for everything you've done, for Cadia, for Armageddon, for showing us that sometimes power doesn't have to come from faith or gene modification or psychic potential. Sometimes it just comes from training hard and refusing to give up." Saitama shook his hand, his grip gentle despite the strength contained in it. "You guys take care of yourselves, okay? And maybe try to find some better hobbies than endless war. It's really depressing. People need breaks. They need peace. They need time to just live." He turned to face the portal, took a step toward it, then paused and looked back. "Oh, and tell those chaos gods, if they're listening, that they should probably chill out. All that anger and disease and scheming and excess isn't healthy. They should try meditation or something. Maybe yoga. Yoga's good for stress." Then he stepped through the portal. The shimmer expanded to accommodate him, reality parting like a curtain. On the other side, in his apartment in City Z, Saitama materialized in the middle of his living room. Genos spun around, his optical sensors going wide with shock, his systems momentarily overloading from the sudden appearance. "Sensei, where were you?" The cyborg's voice was high-pitched with panic and relief mixed together. "I've been searching everywhere. I contacted the Hero Association. I filed a missing person report. I've been scanning every possible frequency looking for your biosignature." "Long story," Saitama replied, brushing imaginary dust off his suit. "Went to space, met some people, punched some monsters. The usual hero stuff." "What day is it?" "It's the same day you left, Sensei. You've been gone for exactly 4 hours and 37 minutes by my chronometer." Saitama looked at the clock on his wall. 4:15, the same time he'd left. The portal had returned him to the exact moment he'd departed, as if no time had passed at all. "Oh good, the sale's still on. I can still make it if I hurry." He grabbed his shopping bag from where it hung on a hook by the door and a D pulled on his boots. Genos stood in the middle of the room, optical sensors flickering as he tried to process what had just happened, mechadendrites twitching with agitation. "Sensei, you cannot simply leave without explaining. Where did you go? What happened? I detected massive energy readings when you disappeared. The dimensional distortion alone registered at levels that shouldn't be possible. The fabric of reality itself was compromised. You could have been killed. You could have been lost in some alternate dimension forever. Do you understand how worried I was?" Genos's voice climbed higher with each word, his normally controlled demeanor cracking under the weight of relief and residual panic. "I went to another galaxy, way out there." Saitama gestured vaguely upward toward the ceiling. "Met some soldiers. They had a problem with green aliens called orcs. Big guys, lots of them. Really loud. Oh, and there were these chaos things, demons or something. They were gross. One of them smelled really bad, like really, really bad. Worse than that time you fought the sewer monster and came back covered in that stuff." Another galaxy. Genos processed this information, his neural networks working at full capacity. "Sensei, intergalactic travel should be impossible without faster-than-light capability. The distances involved are incomprehensible. The nearest galaxy is over 2 million light-years away. Even at light speed, the journey would take millions of years. How did you survive? What did you eat? How did you breathe in the void of space? I didn't travel. I got pulled through some kind of portal thing. It was really bright and made weird noises. Then I was just there, standing on this broken planet with purple sky and lots of fighting. Saitama tied his boots, checking to make sure the laces were secure. The people there were having a bad time. 10,000 years of non-stop war, can you imagine? 10,000 years. No breaks, no peace, just fighting all the time. That sounds horrific, Sensei. Yeah, it was pretty depressing. Made our monster problems seem not so bad. Saitama stood, grabbing his wallet and checking to make sure he still had his discount coupon. But they were tough. Really tough. This old guy named Yarrick, he'd been fighting the same enemy for decades. Lost his arm, his eye, kept fighting anyway. And there were these super soldiers in power armor. Space Marines, they called them. 7 feet tall, could punch through tanks. Nice guys, once you got past the whole serving the Emperor thing they kept talking about. Genos followed Saitama to the door, his concern shifting to intense curiosity. Did you fight, Sensei? Were your abilities effective in this other galaxy? Did the laws of physics operate differently there? Fought a little. Not much, really. Took out some Daemons, scattered a bunch of orcs, punched their boss into a mountain. Saitama opened the door, the familiar creak of the hinges somehow comforting after 5 days in a galaxy where everything screamed and nothing was familiar. Oh, and I destroyed this plague guy. He was really gross. Kept trying to infect me with diseases. Didn't work, though. I think I might be immune to space diseases. You punched their boss into a mountain. Genos's voice was flat, trying to process the casual way his teacher described what must have been an incredible feat of power. Sensei, how large was this mountain? Pretty big. Regular mountain size. Maybe bigger. Hard to tell from that distance. Saitama stepped into the hallway, Genos following close behind. The good thing is they can send me back if something goes wrong. Well, no, they can't actually. They destroyed the machine getting me home. Used power from 3 planets or something. That tech priest guy said it was a one-time thing. 3 planets worth of power? Genos stopped walking, his systems temporarily freezing from shock. Sensei, do you understand how much energy that represents? The entire power output of Earth is barely sufficient to... Yeah, it was a lot. Big machine, lots of lights, made this weird humming sound. Saitama continued down the hallway toward the stairs. Come on, we're wasting time. The sale ends at 5 o'clock. It's 4:20 now. If we hurry, I can still get the good cabbage before Mrs. Tanaka cleans out the produce section. You know how she gets, takes all the good ones and leaves the wilted stuff. They descended the stairs, Saitama taking them 2 at a time, Genos floating slightly to keep pace. The building was the same as always. Peeling paint, flickering lights, the smell of someone cooking fish in apartment 2B. The sound of a television playing a Hero News broadcast in 3C. It was mundane and ordinary, and after 5 days in the grimdark nightmare of Warhammer 40,000, it was the most beautiful thing Saitama had ever experienced. On the street, City Z was going about its evening. People walking home from work, kids playing in a small park, a hero patrol passing overhead, some C-class hero on a hover scooter scanning for threats. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Normal colours, natural colours. Not the purple red of a warp-tainted sky or the diseased green of Nurgle's influence. Just regular sunset colours that didn't hurt to look at. Sensei, I must insist that you provide a full debriefing when we return home, Genos said, as they walked toward the supermarket. If interdimensional travel is possible, the Hero Association needs to know. If there are threats from other galaxies, we must prepare. If your power was effective against enemies from another dimension, we need to document the specifics. Sure. Later, though, after I get groceries. Saitama picked up his pace, walking faster. Man, I missed this. Just normal stuff, normal problems, normal sky. That other place was just too much. Everything was Gothic architecture and screaming and war. Nobody smiled. Nobody relaxed. It was all duty and sacrifice and dying for the Emperor. No wonder everyone looked so stressed. They reached the supermarket with 10 minutes to spare. Inside, it was exactly as Saitama remembered. Fluorescent lights, the beep of scanners, music playing quietly over the speakers. Mrs. Tanaka was indeed in the produce section, examining cabbages with the intensity of a jeweller appraising diamonds. Saitama made a beeline for the vegetables, grabbing a basket and moving with purpose. "Excuse me, Mrs. Tanaka." He reached past her, grabbing 3 good cabbages before she could claim them. "Sorry, but I've had a really long day and I need these." The elderly woman glared at him but stepped aside. "You're lucky you got here when you did, young man. I was about to take all the good ones. The sale price is too good to pass up." "I know. That's why I'm here." Saitama moved through the aisles, grabbing discounted items with practiced efficiency. Bean sprouts, buy one get one free. Eggs marked down. Instant noodles, the good brand, on sale. His basket filled up quickly, each item a small victory. This was what he'd been missing in that other galaxy. Simple pleasures. Sales. The satisfaction of getting a good deal. Genos followed, carrying a second basket despite not eating food. "Sensei, about your interdimensional journey, did you encounter any beings whose power rivaled your own? Any entity that provided genuine challenge?" Saitama paused in the instant noodles aisle, thinking about it seriously. "Not really. The big red demon guy went down in one hit. The orc boss took a casual punch and flew into a mountain. The plague demon took a serious punch, but that's because I was getting annoyed with him killing people. None of them made me try hard. None of them were what I'm looking for." "What you're looking for, Sensei?" "Yeah. Someone who can actually give me a real fight. Someone who can take a full power punch and ask for more. Someone who makes me feel like I did before I got too strong." Saitama grabbed another pack of instant noodles, checking the flavor. That galaxy had powerful things, sure, but they weren't what I need. And honestly, I don't think I helped them. Not really. "What do you mean, Sensei? You said you saved their planet." "I did, but I didn't fix anything. Their problems are too big, too old. 10,000 years of war, 10,000 years of corruption and chaos and suffering. Me punching a few bad guys doesn't change that. They need more than muscle. They need hope. They need change. They need to figure out how to break the cycle." Saitama moved to the checkout line, setting his basket on the counter. The Inquisitor guy, Eisenhorn, he understood that. That's why he sent me home. Not because I wasn't strong enough, but because I was too strong. My presence was making things worse somehow, stirring up the chaos gods or something. The cashier, a tired-looking teenager, began scanning items. "That'll be 2,847 yen. Saitama handed over exact change, having counted it while in line. "Keep the receipt. I like to track my savings." Outside the supermarket, the sun had fully set. City Z's lights were coming on, creating the familiar glow of civilization. Somewhere in the distance, a hero alarm was sounding. Some C-class threat, probably. Nothing serious. Another hero would handle it. Saitama and Genos walked home through familiar streets, carrying bags of groceries. Just another evening in their regular lives. "You know what the weirdest part was?" Saitama said, as they climbed the stairs to his apartment. "How much they believed. Everyone in that galaxy believed so hard. Believed in the Emperor. Believed in duty. Believed in sacrifice. They had faith that bordered on insanity. And maybe that's what kept them going. Maybe that's what let them fight for 10,000 years without giving up. Do you believe in anything that strongly, Sensei?" Saitama thought about it as he unlocked his door. "I believe in being a hero, not for fame or money or recognition, just because it's the right thing to do, because people need help and I can help them. That's enough for me." Back in the Warhammer 40,000 galaxy, the portal had collapsed, the massive machinery self-destructing as designed. The ring of technology was now just debris, floating in orbit around Armageddon. 3 Forge worlds were slowly powering back up, their reactors coming online one by one. Billions had suffered through the blackouts, but they'd survived. The cost had been high, but manageable. On Armageddon's surface, reconstruction had begun. The orcs were scattered, leaderless without Ghazghkull, reduced to small tribes fighting among themselves. It would take months, maybe years, before they could organize again. Time the Imperium desperately needed. Eisenhorn sat in his sanctum aboard the Essene, writing his final report. His hand moved across actual paper with an actual pen. Old-fashioned methods for a document that would be sealed away in the deepest archives. Classified, Omega-level clearance Inquisitor Lord or above subject. Dimensional incursion case file. Omega 77, subject designated the Anomaly, has departed our universe. Timeline of events documented as follows. Subject arrived on Cadia via uncontrolled dimensional rift. Demonstrated ability to destroy Greater Demon Kabanda with minimal effort. Subsequent testing with Adeptus Astartes confirmed subject's power exceeded all known classifications. Deployed to Armageddon against Orc War. Single engagement resulted in neutralization of 3 million plus orcs and incapacitation of war boss Ghazghkull Mag Uruk Thraka. Subsequent engagement with Demon Prince Typhus resulted in complete destruction of target. Subject successfully returned to Dimension of Origin via emergency Archaeotech deployment. Analysis. Subject's power, while extraordinary, proved fundamentally incompatible with our reality. His presence destabilized the warp, triggering increased storm activity and hostile chaos response. Consultation with Eldar Farseer. Eldrad Ulthran confirmed that subject's continued presence would have resulted in catastrophic warp convergence. Recommendation: Omega-level threat to reality. Under no circumstances should any attempt be made to contact, retrieve, or replicate conditions that brought subject to our dimension. While subject demonstrated no hostile intent and provided material assistance, his very existence contradicts fundamental laws of our universe. Conclusion: we learned something valuable from his brief time here. Individual strength, no matter how great, cannot fix systemic problems. The Imperium's challenges run too deep, span too far, involve too many forces for any single being to resolve. However, subject also demonstrated something important. It is possible to fight without hate, to kill without rage, to save lives without requiring faith or fanaticism. He was, in his own way, exactly what he claimed to be, a hero for fun. Perhaps that is the purest form of heroism, acting not from duty or faith or fear, but simply because it is right. Recommendation: file to be sealed under inquisitorial authority. Knowledge of subject's existence restricted to Omega clearance. The Emperor protects, but we cannot rely on outside intervention. We must save ourselves. Gregor Eisenhorn, Inquisitor, Ordo Genos. He sealed the report in a stasis tube, added his personal seal, and handed it to a servo skull for transport to the archives. The report would be buried in the depths of the inquisitorial fortress on Terra, where only the highest authorities could access it. Most people would never know what had happened. History would record the Third War for Armageddon as a great imperial victory, won through faith and firepower. The truth would remain hidden. Yarrick stood on the walls of Hive Hades, looking out at the battlefield being cleared. Recovery crews were moving through the craters, collecting equipment, identifying bodies, marking positions for reconstruction. The Hive City had held. Armageddon had survived. In the distance he could see the mountain where Ghazghkull had impacted. Seismic sensors reported movement deep inside. The beast was digging himself out, as Yarrick had known he would. But it would take time, weeks, maybe months. And when Ghazghkull emerged, he would find his army scattered, his war broken, his mystique shattered by a bald man in a yellow suit who'd punched him into oblivion. "Do you think he'll ever come back, sir?" asked a young officer standing nearby. Lieutenant Harrison, fresh from officer training, assigned to Yarrick's staff. Yarrick smiled, a rare expression on his scarred face. "No, and that's probably for the best. We can't rely on miracles. We can't depend on heroes from other dimensions to save us. We have to save ourselves. That's always been the way. That's the only way that works. But we won, sir. We beat the orcs. Doesn't that count for something? We bought time, that's all. Time to rebuild, to reinforce, to prepare for the next war. Because there's always a next war. That's the Imperium. That's our existence. But time is valuable. Time is everything, and that bald hero gave us time. Yarrick turned away from the wall. Make sure our men understand that. We won this battle, but the war continues. Train harder, fight smarter, hold the line. Because next time we won't have a miracle. We'll only have ourselves. In the realm of chaos, in the twisted domain where the 4 chaos gods held court, the dark powers turned their attention away from Armageddon. The anomaly was gone, removed from their reality, no longer a threat to their plans. The game could continue as it always had. But for a brief moment, something unprecedented had happened. For a brief moment, the eternal enemies, the 4 powers who spent eternity fighting among themselves, had been united. United in fear. United in the understanding that sometimes power exists that cannot be corrupted, cannot be defeated, cannot be controlled. The anomaly had been such a power, and though he was gone, the memory remained. The knowledge that somewhere in some other dimension there existed beings who could reject chaos itself, who could look at the dark gods and simply not care. Khorne, the blood god, raged in his brass throne room, furious at the insult. His champion had been destroyed, swatted aside like an insect. Tzeentch, the architect of fate, plotted in his crystal labyrinth, trying to understand how all his schemes had failed against someone who didn't follow any predictable pattern. Nurgle, grandfather of plagues, tended his garden with unusual melancholy, mourning the loss of Typhus and wondering how life could exist that rejected all gifts of entropy. Slaanesh, the Prince of Pleasure, sulked in halls of excess, insulted by the existence of someone who seemed to desire nothing, who pursued no pleasure or sensation beyond simple satisfaction. But they would move on. They always moved on. The great game continued. The galaxy would burn. Humanity would suffer. That was the way of things. The anomaly was an aberration, a brief interruption in eternal patterns. Nothing more. In City Z, Saitama unpacked his groceries, putting the cabbage in the refrigerator, the instant noodles in the cupboard, the eggs in their special container. Genos sat at the small table, still processing everything he'd been told, trying to formulate questions that would yield useful information. "Sensei, I've been thinking about your experience in this other galaxy." "Uh-huh." Saitama filled a pot with water, setting it on the hot plate to boil. Instant ramen for dinner. The fancy kind from the sale with the extra seasoning packet. If your power was effective there, in a completely different universe with potentially different physical laws, doesn't that suggest something fundamental about the nature of your strength? Something that transcends dimensional boundaries? Maybe. I don't really think about it that much. The water began to heat. Saitama watched it, waiting for the boil. All I know is I trained hard and got strong. Everything else is just details. "But Sensei, the implications are profound. If you can exist and function in multiple universes, if your power operates independent of local reality, you might be some kind of universal constant. A fundamental force that—" "Genos, it's boiling." Saitama pointed at the pot. Genos stopped talking, watching as his teacher added the noodles, the movements practiced and efficient. This was familiar. This was normal. This was home. Saitama cooked his instant ramen with the same focus he brought to everything else. Not because it was important, but because it was what he was doing right now, and anything worth doing was worth doing properly. 3 minutes later, Saitama sat at the table with his bowl of noodles, steam rising in the evening air. Genos sat across from him, watching with the intensity he brought to everything involving his teacher. "You know," Saitama said between bites, "that galaxy made me appreciate what we have here. Sure, we get monster attacks. Sure, there are villains and disasters and weird stuff. But we also have peace. We have normal days. We have time to just exist without fighting. Those people in that other place, they don't have that. They're born into war, live in war, die in war. 10,000 years of that. No breaks, no hope beyond survival." "It sounds terrible, Sensei." "It was, but they kept going anyway. That's the impressive part. 10,000 years and they haven't given up. That takes something special, something I don't have." Saitama slurped more noodles. I got strong because I trained hard. They stayed strong because they never had a choice. They're tougher than me in ways that matter. I disagree, Sensei. You are the strongest. Genos. Being strong isn't just about punching hard. It's about keeping going when there's no reason to. It's about holding the line when the line should have broken. It's about having faith when faith is unreasonable. Saitama finished his noodles, drinking the broth directly from the bowl. Those people have that. I'm just a guy who can punch good. You are far more than that, Sensei. Maybe, but I'm also just a guy who likes grocery sales and instant ramen and normal boring days. Saitama set down his empty bowl. And you know what? I'm okay with that. Let other galaxies have their eternal wars and their chaos gods and their grimdark futures. I'll stay here, in my cheap apartment, eating discount food, being a hero for fun. That's enough. Outside, the city sounds continued. Traffic, distant conversations, the hum of daily life. Somewhere, a hero was fighting a villain. Somewhere else, someone was having a regular dinner with their family. Life continued. Mundane and beautiful and normal. The way it should be. Saitama stood, taking his bowl to the sink. Tomorrow, he'd probably fight a monster. Maybe a villain would show up. Maybe nothing would happen and he'd just do grocery shopping and watch TV. That uncertainty, that normalcy, was precious in a way he hadn't fully appreciated before. In that other galaxy, everyone knew what tomorrow would bring. War, more war, war forever. Here, tomorrow could be anything. That was the difference. That was what made this worth protecting. I'm going to bed, Saitama announced. Big day tomorrow. Gotta check if there are any new sales. Maybe hit the public bath if I have time. Understood, Sensei. I shall compile a detailed analysis of your interdimensional journey and present it in the morning. Sure. Just let me sleep first. Saitama headed to his futon, already laid out in the corner. He paused at the window, looking out at City Zed. The lights, the buildings, the normal, ordinary, beautiful city that had monster attacks sometimes, but also had peaceful days and grocery sales, and people just living their lives. Hey, Genos? Yes, Sensei? We've got it pretty good here, don't we? We do, Sensei. We have peace between the attacks. We have hope. We have heroes like you to protect us. And most importantly, we have tomorrow. Always tomorrow. Yeah, Saitama smiled, a small, genuine smile. We do. This concludes Case File Omega 77. What started as a simple interdimensional accident became a lesson in the nature of power, the value of peace, and the importance of perspective. Saitama, the hero who can defeat anyone with one punch, discovered that some problems are too big to punch. Some challenges require more than strength, and sometimes the greatest power is knowing when to walk away, to return to normalcy, to appreciate what you have. The Warhammer 40,000 galaxy continues its eternal war, 10,000 years of darkness with no end in sight. But for a brief moment, they had a glimpse of something different. A hero who fought without hate, who killed without rage, who helped without asking for faith or worship. A reminder that heroism can be simple, can be pure, can exist just because it should. And in City Z, life goes on. Saitama will wake up tomorrow, check for sales, maybe fight a monster and go about his day. Genos will follow, learning and growing, trying to understand the mystery of his teacher's power. The Hero Association will continue ranking heroes and organizing responses. Villains will attack. Heroes will defend. The cycle of normal life continues. Two galaxies, separated by dimensional barriers that should never have been crossed. One mired in eternal war, the other facing regular challenges, but also knowing peace. Each has lessons for the other. Each has value in its own way. But Saitama chose his galaxy, chose normalcy over eternal legend, chose grocery sales over cosmic significance. And in that choice, perhaps, lies the truest form of heroism. Not the kind that demands recognition, but the kind that simply exists because it should. Remember to subscribe for more interdimensional investigations. What crossover should we examine next? Leave your suggestions below. Until next time, remember that power without purpose is meaningless, that sometimes the greatest battles are knowing which fights to walk away from, and that normalcy, boring, mundane normalcy, is a precious gift that should never be taken for granted. The investigation is closed, the portal is sealed, the anomaly has returned home, and somewhere in City Z, a hero sleeps peacefully, dreaming of tomorrow's sales, content in the knowledge that he is exactly where he belongs. Case File Omega 7. 7. Complete.